Welcome to the Michigan Man Podcast on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew, for Wolverine fans from coast to coast. Go Blue and welcome to the show. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. With me on our game day segment this week will be Michigan basketball radio play-by-play voice Brian Boesch. First, a few of my thoughts to get us going, though. I think during our interview today, Brian Boesch said it best. Michigan picked a bad night to have a bad night. For me, it was a grueling game to watch, and I'm sure it was the same for a lot of you. I thought we even looked tight at times. Even though the shots were there for us, we were stone cold. It also hurt that we were only 6 of 11 from the free throw line. We shot 39% for the game, but with 1/2 of a second left, we still had a chance to win it. I think that says a lot about this team. Even on a bad night, when shots weren't falling, they were able to scratch and claw right down to that final shot. It was heartbreaking to watch, though. I especially felt bad for Franz Wagner. I know a lot of you were asking after the game why Sean D. Brown did not get that last shot. Well, the inbound pass had 3 options, depending how UCLA defended it. Keep in mind, we had 1/2 of a second to work with, so it was an easy read for Hunter. Go to Franz because of the 3 options, he was the one open. He missed, so I have no issue with the fact he had that last shot. He had a great season, as did this team. We fell just short, not because of Franz Wagner. We lost that as a team because it was a total offensive outage. My guest today says even though the loss hurts now, he thinks time will remember this team in a very special way. Not for how they lost, but for the journey they took us on this season during a pandemic and gave us so many moments of joy. And I agree. Up next is the radio play-by-play voice of Michigan basketball, Brian Boesch, on this week's edition of The Michigan Man, so stay with us. Here with us on our game day segment today to talk about the finality of this Michigan basketball season is radio play-by-play voice Brian Boesch. Great to have you with us, Brian.
Yeah, glad to be here, Mike. Thanks for having me.
Well, Brian, until Franz Wagner's final shot was a miss, I think most Michigan fans watching thought, hey, we're going to find a way to pull it out against UCLA. It was a gut-wrenching finish, wasn't it?
Yeah, and just with how many great looks Michigan got down the stretch. I mean, a couple of buckets right on the low block. You had some open threes, missed free throws throughout the game. I mean, there were ample opportunities. And that I think is the frustrating part, is that it was obviously a winnable game on paper. You know, you don't get many cracks at a double-digit seed on, in the Elite Eight. Now, UCLA was not your typical 11 seed. That team had proven that it was seeded incorrectly, or at least was better than its seed. But still, I mean, it's better than a 2 or a 3 in most years. And just so many chances, so many opportunities that went begging. And I think that's a tough part. If you go out and you lose by 10, 12 points, it's certainly disappointing, but, the better team won that night. Now, I think the better team won on Tuesday based on how they played. But I don't think the better team on paper won, and that's what lingers. That's what's frustrating, that, Michigan picked a bad night to have a bad night.
Oh, yeah. Well, and the second guessers were out immediately on the message boards and in social media, of course, asking why Franz took the last shot. And I know we were coming off the timeout. Jawan had diagrammed the play. I'm not even sure if Franz was the first option on that inbounds play, but he sure got a clean look, didn't he?
Yeah, I had no problem with it. I mean, obviously, in a perfect world, would you have liked to have chosen somebody else? Maybe. But Franz is a guy who's tall enough to be able to get off a clean look, even if he's pretty well guarded. He's athletic enough to be able to clear out and give himself a chance. And he's got a quick enough trigger to where with 0.5 seconds, he can get the shot off. So, I mean, honestly, I just wanted them to be able to get a chance. Mm-hmm. When you have 0.5 of a second left, I mean, that is a quick stretch, obviously. So I had no problem with it. He got a look. He got it off. It would have counted had it gone. I think there's other things you can nitpick from earlier there, but gosh, with a half second left, I don't know how much better you could have done. And looking at the play, I mean, Brandon Johns Jr. was the option on the inside. You had Sean D kind of going the opposite way of Franz. And based on where Hunter Dickinson was inbounding, I mean, that was the best pass. That was the best option based on what UCLA was showing. So I had no problem with it. In that situation, if you're asking me, all I want is a chance. All I want is the shot to count if it goes. Michigan got that, and unfortunately it didn't fall, but I had no problem with the design or the decision.
Well, because of the style UCLA plays throughout the course of the game, it was at times a very difficult game to watch, though, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, they wanted to slow things down. They really executed their game plan well. I mean, that was, when you looked at this game on paper, you felt like it could be an outcome of anywhere from, Michigan by 20 to UCLA by, 7 or 8, and they've got, a few of their guys going and they play good defense. Well, it was so close. It was a 2-point game because they played really well defensively, and the only player who did anything consistently offensively was wearing the blue of UCLA, and that was Johnny Juzang. I mean, he was brilliant. He made some really tough shots, especially in that first half. And, again, I mean, that's what makes March so unique, what makes the NCAA tournament so unique in that, the range of outcomes in pretty much every game does have the underdog with a chance. But in this game, like in, a good number of games this year, Michigan had more outcomes to win, but UCLA still had plenty of outs. They still had plenty of chances. And this was one where they dictated the terms. They played at their pace. They had a guy go off. Michigan didn't. And, they were able to scratch it out at the end. I mean, this is a team that came in 12-3 in games decided by 5 points or less or in overtime. They won 2 OT games in the tournament. And, I mean, gosh, I think when you look at the number and you think, oh, do you want UCLA or Alabama? I think before the Alabama-UCLA game, I'm probably thinking, yeah, I want the Bruins. That would be a better matchup. Then I saw them do what they did in overtime. So many teams would have folded in that spot. They give up a 3 to force overtime. UCLA didn't just, refuse to fold. They dominated.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they scored the first 7, and they were resilient. And Alabama didn't have a chance in overtime. And it was as if UCLA was the team that hit the 3 to tie the game in regulation. That right there proves to everybody that they're for real. Now, I'm not going to pick them to beat Gonzaga or win the national championship or anything along those lines, but, I mean, they're good. They were dangerous, and they executed, a little bit more than Michigan. There's no doubt.
Well, now that it's all over with, do you think, Brian, that UCLA was just a very difficult matchup for us, or was it more that Michigan was just ice cold and could not get a rhythm in that game?
I think it's the latter. I mean, and now to the rhythm point, a lot of that was dictated by UCLA. There are 2 teams out there. It's very easy for us as pro Michigan to just look at it from the Michigan perspective. A big reason why Michigan struggled from the field, didn't have a flow in the game, was because of UCLA. But some of those missed layups, shooting the way that they did at the free throw line, committing the turnovers that Michigan did, certainly some of them were forced, but there were some that were gifted to UCLA. So this was not a perfect matchup by any stretch, but Michigan had, you think about it. Tiger Campbell was a fair matchup for Mike Smith. You felt like Michigan had a few defenders who could handle Johnny Juzang. Jaime Jaquez is a guy who's had a great tournament, but Michigan has the pieces to slow him down, when they play well. Hunter Dickinson had an advantage inside. It just didn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a lot because of UCLA, and it is a lot because Michigan just did not play their best game. They played a subpar game, and that's going to get you in the NCAA tournament. I don't care who you're facing.
Well, in that CBS pregame, Charles Barkley brought up an interesting point. He said, if I'm Michigan, I'm taking advantage of the big boys in the paint, and I'm getting Hunter Dickinson the ball every time I can, early and often. But UCLA did a really good job of taking that away, didn't they?
They did, and that was something in the first half. You could tell it was a halftime adjustment there was a first half stretch. It was after Austin Davis's first trip in the game, and Dickinson came back, and he was out there for a full media battle, and I don't think he touched the ball, which when you look back at every game for Michigan, I mean, I don't have these numbers on me, but I would be shocked if Hunter Dickinson went longer in a game without touching the basketball. And I'm not saying, oh, that's just terrible coaching, what's wrong with Michigan? Because, again, there are two teams out there on the floor. And I think UCLA just did a great job of preventing Hunter Dickinson from getting his positioning. It's not all about size, right? I mean, we saw Hunter Dickinson have plenty of success against a couple of teams, that had some real length on the inside, especially Florida State. But UCLA, they did a great job of slowing him down. Michigan made some adjustments and really did work through the paint in that second half. But it did not get them all the way back, of course. But no, it was certainly surprising. That was where Michigan had the matchup. I mean, Cody Riley, their best big, he was in foul trouble all game. So, if you tell me in that situation, well, Riley's going to be in foul trouble and Hunter Dickinson's going to have some opportunities, you think, okay, well, Michigan's in a great position. But, you can throw in those ifs, ands, and buts, and it doesn't mean a whole lot when, you have to consider the rest of the context of the game. And that's what's so tough, is that the ingredients were there, the formula was in front of you. It just didn't pan out.
Well, after the game ended, what really, bothered me was that I felt bad for Franz Wagner. I think he was 1 for 10 from the floor in that game. But, Brian, he was working hard. He was getting the shots he wanted, no question. They just didn't fall. And I guess that kind of sums up Michigan's team offense against UCLA, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I feel so badly for him because he, just like Isaiah Livers, deserved obviously a better ending to his Michigan career. If Franz does what I think a lot of us expect and head to the NBA, he deserved a better fate. Now, obviously, you got to go out there and earn it. You got to get the job done. He did not, but that performance belies what he meant to this team and this program, not just this season, but in both years here. I mean, he is a special talent. He is a great two-way player, and he has been someone who really handles things the right way. And for all the great performances we saw from him, it just wasn't his night. And that's the thing. I mean, in the NBA, you can get away with a bad night in a game 1 or a game 2 of a best. In this, it's one and done. It's so harsh. I mean, it really is. And for Franz, you just ache for him, because that was not the best from Franz. It might have been the worst we've seen of Franz, and he still had a chance. I mean, he's an inch away from having a shot that's there with Trey Burke and Jordan Poole and some of the other great shots in Michigan history. And I mean, that'd have been a nice trivia question down the road if he makes that shot. Well, what did he shoot from the field in that game? Oh, he was probably 8 of 11. He was probably great. No, he wasn't. And that's what's so harsh about it. And I think that individually, he's the one I hurt for the most coming off that floor. And obviously it'd be different based on, the different games if Michigan had lost earlier. But yeah, it just sucks. It really does.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I know it's hard to find bright spots when the season just ended and we were on such a roll. But if there was one, not only in the tournament, but in the game against UCLA, it was the play of Brandon Johns Jr. He really, really stepped it up on both ends of the floor, didn't he? Yeah,
I mean, that was the best stretch of his career. That was him realizing the potential that I think everybody in this program, from John Beilein and Luke Yaklich and DeAndre Haynes, to the carryover in Sadie Washington, to Juwan Howard, Howard Isley, Phil Martelli. I mean, all these guys know that was there. It is in his arsenal. It is in his, we talk about range of outcomes, right? Mm-hmm. It's in his range of outcomes. He can be an aggressor, an athletic specimen, a scorer, a defender. I mean, that block he had in the second half was one of the coolest plays of the tournament for Michigan. And it's there. And it goes to show you how much, you can be given all the tools, but you've got to have the mental side. And Brandon wants to have it. Brandon works to have it, and I know he does. And to want and the desire, it's tough to explain. Like, they say, the gym doesn't lie. You can't just spray paint or Photoshop, physique, muscles, athleticism, right? Like, you have to be given some of it. There are a certain range of outcomes, but ball don't lie in the gym. If you put in the work, you're going to get the results. But when it comes to the emotional, the mental side of things, that's different. You can want it so badly, but then confidence issues, just your mental approach to the game, it can deviate. And I really admire him for being so upfront and honest about it. And he has, ever since I've really first started, covering the team and talking to him, he wants it to be there. And I'm really happy for him that he stuck it out. He got an opportunity. Of course not. You don't want that to happen because of the Isaiah Livers injury, but that's the part of basketball. I'm fascinated by what happens with him because it had been very easy for him to transfer out. And who knows? I mean, weird stuff happens in the off season, but boy, I really hope to see him in that Michigan uniform next year. And given it, the types of efforts, both, on the court and in his mind, because if that happens, we saw the upside in this tournament. Now, that does not fix, the previous 2.8 seasons of, the inconsistency, but it's there. And if he can unlock it, he could be an all Big Ten performer. I have absolutely no doubt.
No, I agree with you on that. Well, it was such a tough loss because I think, and this is just me, I think if we play that UCLA team 10 times, we win 9 of those. And that is the beauty of the tournament, though. One bad game, and you're done, and that's what stings the most, isn't it, Brian?
Yeah, I mean, Abilene Christian wasn't better than Texas. Oral Roberts wasn't better than Ohio State. Ohio wasn't better than Virginia. But they were better on that night. They executed better. They rose to the occasion, and they got the wins. And that's what makes March special, intoxicating, and in the case of Michigan after that game, infuriating.
Yeah.
Is that Michigan is, listen, again, UCLA won the game. They were better. But on paper, Michigan was the better team. They were favored. They had the better players overall. If you play that, Michigan wins it more times than UCLA. But you've got to come out and prove it. You got to come out and do it when it matters most. And, and that's, to me, you talk about the finality, and it's not just the loss. It's just, this team's never going to play together again. Yeah. I don't know what the team's going to look like next year. We obviously know about the 6 really talented freshmen who are coming in. But, beyond that, who the heck knows? With the way that the transfer portal is already fired up, with all the movement that's feasible in college basketball, there were surprises from last offseason. I don't think we thought the transfers were going to happen exactly the way that they did. We knew they were possible. Obviously, we know transfers are possible this year. What gives me hope and what gives me confidence is that I don't know if you can find a team that more successfully incorporated 2 transfers like Michigan did. Mike Smith was an up transfer, which at point guard, which does not happen successfully very much, and he was such a critical cog. And then Sean D. Brown Jr., what an attitude, what an approach. Both those guys, they just had the right attitudes. They had different roles compared to what they were used to at the collegiate level, and they came in and they just played their hearts out for the role that they had. And that gives me a lot of upside, just as much as the recruiting for Juwan Howard. Listen, some recruits are going to hit, some recruits are going to miss. We've seen that over the years with John Beilein, with other coaches in college basketball. John Calipari, every 5-star isn't the same, right?
Right.
Kentucky isn't great every single year because they get the best recruiting class. So those are going to be hits and misses. The fact that he can supplement his roster in that way, I know it's a small sample size, but that gives me a lot of hope that he can, it could be a net positive for Michigan, even if there are some transfers from, the talented group that Michigan can have that returns.
Well, Brian, let's talk about the sacrifices these players made this year to play the sport they love. And I don't mean just Michigan, all college basketball, all college athletes who have competed in, as I said, a variety of sports. My hat goes off to them. It has been a grueling, stressful, unreal year, hasn't it?
Yeah, I give them so much credit because testing every single day, not knowing every single day if you're definitively going to have practice or a game or, travel to a road game. I mean, I think about how difficult this year's been for me and for, those that I know, and I've been one of the fortunate ones. I've known no one, closely who has died of the virus. I've only known a few people who have had the virus. I've been able, obviously, to call games like I've been able to do, and I still know that I've had good days and bad. I've struggled with it. For these players, for the staff, for them to do what they did and try to compete at a high level in a really competitive sport, league, and environment, and do that is remarkable. In addition to keeping up with their studies for the students, and answering dumb questions from people like me. I just have so much respect, and what I hope it won't happen right away, but I hope over the weeks, months, and certainly years down the road that these players grasp what this season meant to people like us, to people who love Michigan, who love college basketball, because I don't know about you, but I gathered a lot of happiness from sports this year. I think early on there's that FOMO of not being able to go to the games, or in our perspective, not being able to have the types of crowds, and we weren't able to travel on the road trips. But I got so much life, so much happiness, so much stress relief from watching this team play. And I know that I'm not alone in that. And I hope, even if they did not reach the goals that they set for themselves, I hope down the road they realize, and understand just how much the fans appreciated what they did, even though they couldn't show that appreciation inside Chrysler or in Indianapolis as much as they could have, because they weren't able to be there.
That's the way I feel about it too, Brian. I think, in 5 or 10 years from now, when we reminisce and look back on this season, by that time, it's not going to be the way it ended that we remember. I think it's going to be like a lot of our life. It's going to be about the journey. What a great ride it was for all of us, players, fans, everyone out there, because I think it might take more time for us to realize this was a special group of players.
Yeah, and I know that, seasons end in different ways. I can't speak for every Michigan fan, but, I'm sure that 2013, I know it does from my perspective, 2013 has more of a sting than 2018. I mean, Michigan got to the same stage, but, Michigan was right there with Louisville. In 2018, we all knew who the best team in college basketball was. Michigan had an incredible run. It was such a fun ride, but, Villanova won every game by double figures in the tournament. They controlled that championship game. I think it just stings a little bit more because Michigan, it didn't play anywhere close to its best game, and it lost by 2 on a shot at the buzzer. So I think that's what will make it a little bit tougher to digest in the short and medium term. But yeah, I mean, when we look back at this, when that banner's unveiled for a Big Ten regular season championship, I wish there had been a Final Four one up there as well. But that I do think, it'll age well. I think that's the best way of putting it. This season will age really well, even if it hurts right now.
If we could just for a minute or two speculate about next year's team, because already I know fans are looking forward to next season. The NCAA has granted an additional year of eligibility for seniors, and we have a lot of those on this team, and I'm sure everyone is not coming back. The numbers just won't work out, but just to name a few, we have Eli Brooks, Mike Smith, Sean D. Brown Jr. Is it realistic that we could see some of those guys back?
I think it's a possibility. Obviously, I'm not in a reporter type of a role. I'm not trying to break any news, so I'm not someone who's going to ask people that during the season. I know that the questions have been asked to these guys, and in most cases, reporters have to ask the question. Normally, the players say, "Well, I haven't thought about it in the middle of the season, or the season just ended." I know Eli was asked about it after the game, and that's never going to be. It has to be asked, and it's never going to be answered. We all get the song and dance with that. Anyone who comes back of that is a huge bonus. Obviously, you'd love to have Eli, Mike, Sean D, Austin Davis. Even Isaiah Livers and Franz Wagner. Yeah, of course, you'd love to have all those guys back. Certainly I don't think Isaiah Livers will return Franz Wagner, I think he's going to be a late lottery pick. I think he's going. To me, I look at this roster, and it really feels like it's Hunter Dickinson's team next year, with just how he carries himself, with the things that he can realistically improve, and that's just developing more of an outside shot, developing the ability to go right more frequently, kind of crafting himself as a little bit more of an NBA-type player. This feels like his team, like his opportunity. And, obviously, who knows? I mean, there might be some interest for him to at least explore the NBA, but that feels like this team. And then you kind of see from there, what do you get from Brandon Johns Jr. if he returns? Zeb Jackson, Terrence Williams after a year, another year in Camp Sanderson, what can they look like? There's some talent to go along with, the best recruiting class that Michigan's brought in since the Fab Five. So there's talent there, but it's going to be an interesting, puzzle to put together. Though, again, the puzzle that Michigan created from some uneven pieces during a pandemic turned out pretty darn well. So I've got all the faith that this coaching staff can do it, even though certainly it will be a storyline and it'll be a challenge throughout this offseason.
Well, final question for you, Brian, before we let you get away. Your thoughts on the Final Four matchups and which team, in your opinion, will cut down the nets in Indy Monday night?
It's tough not to say Gonzaga, right? Yeah. I was one of the people who kind of thought, maybe USC can give them a game. Evan Mobley's been playing well. They've got, they've performed so well in the tournament, and that was an annihilation. So, personally, I think the two national semifinals will be somewhat lopsided. I think Gonzaga and Baylor have been the two best teams overall in college basketball this season. I think that those two teams will play. I love the story for Houston. What they've done has been pretty remarkable, but, they've played 4 double-digit seeds. I think Baylor's been a little bit more tested, and I think they're better. And then in the Natty, I'll take Gonzaga, but I wouldn't be surprised in the least if Baylor gets the job done. I mean, we haven't seen a team play for the national championship. Even that Kentucky team in 5-6 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
They got to the Final Four and lost. If you're sitting there with a chance to go undefeated in the national championship game, you wonder if they'll be a little bit tight knowing they're so close to something so historic. So give me Gonzaga like a lot of people will pick, but I'll tell you, if the line is anything more than Gonzaga -2 or 3 in the national championship game against Baylor, if I were a betting man, which I am not, I would lean the side of Baylor in terms of giving me the points, because I think that would be a classic.
Well, it's going to be an interesting finish to this very strange college basketball season. And even though we're not in it, I look forward to watching it all. And once again, our guest today has been the outstanding radio play-by-play voice of Michigan basketball, Brian Boesch. Brian, I know it's going to be a busy off-season with a lot going on. Who's coming back? Who's leaving? So hopefully in the coming months we can get you back on the show and talk more Michigan hoops.
Would be happy to, Mike. Thanks for having me.
On Quick Hits today, football season ticket packages are now open for renewal. If you are interested in becoming a new season ticket holder, you can find the information on how to do that at mgoblue.com. The renewal deadline for current ticket holders is April 22nd. Now we have to wait and see how many fans will be allowed in the stadium and what Plan B is after those limitations are announced. Michigan softball against Michigan State, scheduled for this Friday through Sunday, has been postponed due to COVID-19 protocols. The programs will work with the Big Ten Conference to identify potential rescheduling options later this season. We will be back in action next down in Columbus against Ohio State next weekend, we hope. Baseball will travel to College Park, Maryland for games against Northwestern and Maryland this weekend. We are 11-4, entering the week a half game behind Indiana in the Big Ten Conference race. We are ranked number 25 by D1Baseball.com, number 24 by Baseball America, and number 16 by Collegiate Baseball Newspaper. Once again, congratulations to Juwan Howard and his team on a great season. We fell just one shot short of another Final Four appearance. But I get the feeling we're going to have more chances to get back there in the next few years. That will do it for another week. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. Have a blessed and a happy Easter, everyone. Until we meet again, take care, and as always, go blue. Thanks for joining us today on The Michigan Man, here on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew. Our listener lines are open 24/7 for your calls at 313-263-4842. That's 313-263-4842. Or email us at themichiganmanpodcast@yahoo.com. That's themichiganmanpodcast@yahoo.com. The Michigan Man Podcast is produced at the studios of Robin Lynn Productions, Allen Park, Michigan, and is not affiliated with the University of Michigan. Go Blue!